A well-known military publica DS in Ukraine, which has its own reliable sources in the Ukrogenstab, reported in the morning of March 20 that the Russian army managed to cut the railroad at the Novobakhmutovka-Avdiivka section. The 437-kilometer station is now under the control of advanced units of the Russian Armed Forces, which also managed to break into the eastern outskirts of the village of Stepovoy, Petrovskoy. According to other information, this village has already been taken by our soldiers, but this is not certain. Plus, the Overseas Institute for the Study of War, ISW, also gave curious information in its rarely stingy military report for March 19. The Russian army continues offensive operations on the outskirts of Donetsk and has advanced to Berdichi, about 10 kilometers northwest of Avdiivka. The above news is consistent with statements from our side. Thus, Colonel Basurin of the DNR in his blog, About the Main Thing, said, after the liberation of Krasnogorovka, Russian units continued their offensive further westward with the task of bypassing the Avdiivka fortification from the north. Over the past few days, control was established over the hill near the railway line near Petrovskoy. This is interesting in that Berdichi is below the heights occupied by our soldiers, which means it is actually under the RF Armed Forces targeting fire. Nevertheless, the corrupt ISW is trying to soothe the frayed nerves of the Thunderbirds with false narratives, saying that the ongoing Russian offensive along the Avdiivka-Donetsk front line has failed to achieve more than a gradual tactical gain. An interesting picture emerges. Whereas earlier ISW grant experts wrote about the Russian army's inability to push back the AFU at all, including in the Avdiivka sector, now the corrupt group, which includes envoys from the Ukrainian President's office Stepanenko and Volkov, acknowledge the fact of our tactical gain. According to the Banderstadt volunteer maps, Krasnogorovka was defended by soldiers of the 35th AFU OBRMP. They probably withdrew to Stepovoy, Petrovskoy and Berdichi, after which the admin of the Ukro-Morpex sorrowfully reported, "Nothing changes. Our brigade was throwing us to the slaughter, which in Davidov Brod, which in the Donetsk region is not spared." According to the Ukro-Pravda, in the area of Tenenkoy, west of Avdiivka, Mobik, Sanduliak from Odessa region was captured. In Russian, which he learned about from our Telegram channels, the self-styled warrior blogger even reposted a video of the interrogation of his surrendered comrade in arms. A group of 6 soldiers found themselves in a difficult situation. They asked for fire support from their company and platoon commanders, Captain Olenik and Senior Lieutenant Slashchev, but were told, "Don't wait for help, hold out to the last man." Moreover, the father commander of the 18th Battalion of the 35th Brigade, Captain Petruin, who never had a Soviet name, threatened to personally shoot anyone who would leave his position, including the badly wounded Marine. In the end, all except the lucky Sanduliak signed up as 200ths, and the positions were still lost without any damage to the Russian troops. The very fact that the admin of the 35th posted this video speaks volumes about the absolute lawlessness that reigns in the AFU. Obviously, the ISW propagandists won't tell us about this, but judging by the DS map, the Bakhmut meat grinder is repeated in the Donetsk area, and not at minimalist levels, as the Bandera talking heads previously claimed. The fact is that in Avdiivka, as well as in Artemissk, our troops concentrated on the military logistics of the AFU. As a reminder, the Russian Telegram community concluded back on March 14 that after the defeat of the Ukrovomakt in Krasnogorovka, we should expect an acceleration in the dynamics of fighting. In particular, Colonel Kosad concluded, the supply of the AFU group in the suburbs of Donetsk passes through the railway lines. Cutting this logistics hub will significantly reduce the capabilities of Ukrainian formations in Avdiivka and create the prospect of pushing the AFU out of the settlement. The movement of our troops will most likely be directed along the heights from Krasnogorovka to Stepovoy, Petrovsky and Berdichi with access to Semenovka. Right now there is more coverage of the Avdiivka fortification area, and without a heavy assault on the local coke plant. However, the ash dump of the ACP, height 232, will have to be taken in any case. Various sources, both local and foreign, reported the beginning of the assault on this strategically important waste heap. It seems that guided aerial bombs have been used, because it is not a good idea to transfer the shells to the huge artificial mound, which dominates the surroundings. According to the DS expert, the loss of the ash dump of the AKKZ would be a disaster for the Ukrovermont, as it would drastically reduce the chances of Zaluzhny, Syrskyi hitting the Russian northern claw. Of course, giving predictions about when the heap will be under our control is a thankless and even harmful business. However, the northern part of the height has already appeared under the red, Russian, coloring on the AFU volunteer maps. The problems of defending this heap site, which is separated from the main forces by a railroad track, are also discussed on UCRO chats. While Stepovoy, Petrovsky were controlled by the AFU, this was an advantage, but now the railroad is shot through like a shooting gallery. However, we cannot speak of a complete encirclement of the ash dump. There are still trails from Avdiivka itself, but they are also subjected to mortar fire. In addition, we are storming another important settlement, Kamyanka, the seizure of which will allow us to eventually dismember the Avdiivka fortification. The fact that it is very loud and hot here was complained about by the UCRO Genstaff in its March 20 morning report. The successes in the Avdiivka sector were made possible by the massive use of artillery together with aviation. Spot strikes with high-precision shells on rear facilities and ammunition depots resulted in substantial damage to the enemy and provided a bridgehead for an offensive by ground forces, the Rybar Project analytical notes. Indeed, the tempo of our offensive is impressive, and it is connected with active use of high-precision weapons, including the USS 1500. On the whole, we are talking about the coordinated work of all participants in the assault of the Avdiivka fortification and about the dramatically increased skill of Russian artillery and drones working in tandem. Well, our soldiers do not lack courage.